Aloha kako. Thank you for joining us today. We have a wonderful presentation today on a perfect day for an albatross and other seabird tales. So thank you so much for joining us. We have participants today from nearly every state and several countries, including Brazil and the Russian Federation. And so thank you for joining us. And just a couple of quick technical details. If you're having problems with your audio, on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see the GoToWebinar control panel. And in there, there's a tab called Audio, and that's usually where you can find and resolve any of your problems that you might be having with your audio. Just make sure to check what the your input and output things are, what your microphone and speakers are. A lot of times, your speaker is set to the wrong speaker. That's typically where we have problems. But if you do have any concerns or other things during the presentation, please type them into the question box down below or the chat feature, and we will try to address and help you as we can. So again, thank you for joining us today. And today our presenters for you are myself, Andy Collins. I'm the education coordinator for Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. And we also have Jenny Stock, who's the education and outreach coordinator for Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary. And of course, the wonderful Caren Loebel-Fried, who's our author and reader today. We'll read from her wonderful book. So thank you for joining us. This presentation is part of the Get Into Your Sanctuary Day and Week events for NOAA's National Marine Sanctuary System. One thing I forgot to mention. So this presentation is being recorded, just so you know. We will have it up on the website within a week or so after the event airs, and you can watch it again. We'll be sending out a link to that after we get it up on the website. So just want to make sure you know that it is being recorded. So our National Marine Sanctuary System is our system of underwater parks. We have many sites across the United States and out here in the Pacific. On the East Coast, we have Stellwagen Bank, Monitor National Marine Sanctuary, of course, Florida Keys, down in the southern part of Florida. We have two very new sites, Mallows Bay in the Potomac River, and the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast Trail, which is our most recent National Marine Sanctuary. So our system is still growing, which is very exciting. On the West Coast, we have Olympic Coast, and on the coast of California, we have several sites. Of course, the one that Jenny works for, Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary, but also Monterey Bay, Channel Islands. Out here in the Pacific, we have two sites in Hawaii, Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument that I work for, and Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. And last but not least, down in the South Pacific, we have American Samoa National Marine Sanctuary and Rose Atoll Marine National Monument. So these sites comprise our National Marine Sanctuary System. And hopefully you get to visit one of these sites to learn more about it and to rejuvenate your spirit and soul and see some wonderful natural features, maybe go on a whale watch or some other things. But today, we have a great treat for you. We have my friend and author, Caren Loebel-Fried. She's an award-winning author and artist from Volcano, Hawaii. Birds, conservation, and the natural world are the foundations of her work. Caren has created 8 storybooks to date, including Manu, The Boy Who Loved Birds, published by UH Press, A Perfect Day for an Albatross, published by Cornell Lab Publishing Group. Her books have been recipients of the American Folklore Society's Aesop's Prize for Children's Folklore and the Hawaii Book Publishers Association Ka Palapala Po'okela Awards. Caren also creates iconic educational art for conservation organizations and government agencies, including U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Midway Atoll National Wildlife Refuge, Kilauea Point Natural History Association, and the Conservation Council for Hawaii. She learned the ancient art of block printing from her mother. Through her hand-colored block print art in her stories, Caren aims to bring people closer to the natural world with the hope that they will want to help care for it. So with that, it's my great pleasure to welcome Caren. And if your webcam isn't already on, you can turn that on and I will share your book. Hold on for 1 second.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Andy. So happy to be here. I'm so excited to share my book with everybody. So Andy's going to be sharing it. I'm seeing myself. Are you seeing the, oh, there we go. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we just have
So
to
I'll
cue
go
it
back to
the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to be showing you after the book. The art is all block prints. I'm going to show you a sample of my blocks at the end. So the book is called A Perfect Day for an Albatross by me, Caren Loebel-Fried. So I'm going to start on page 1. I wake before the sun is up. I feel the warm egg beneath me. My neighbors sit on their eggs, sometimes quiet, sometimes clopping their beaks in warning at anyone who comes too close. I am Malie, a Laysan albatross, and I have come to this coral and sand atoll called Midway, where I hatched many years ago. The air is warm and still. The albatrosses around me are preening, or dozing, or just sitting still. The sun is now rising up above the horizon. It's a new day. Not far from here, when I grew old enough to fly for the first time, I looked at the ocean and spread my wings. I ran and felt the wind beneath my wings lifting me up and up. Suddenly, I was no longer over land. The rolling, splashing, wet sea was beneath me. I learned to land on the ocean, catch squid and flying fish eggs to eat, then run across the surface of the ocean and take to the air again. I explored for years, traveling across the ocean, the smells and signals from the sea telling me where to find food. Then one day, after 4 years at sea, I felt the urge to come back here to Midway, the land where I was born. When I returned, there were many albatrosses all around, some sitting on nests, some dancing, wailing, grunting, and bill clacking. I had seen dancing when I was a youngster, so I joined a group of other young albatrosses. Together, we stumbled through the movements and sounds. It would take more practice to do all the right moves, to sing and dance well. I flew off to sea again, but returned the next winter, and for many winters after that, to meet other albatrosses and practice the dance. Each time I returned, I was excited to join the dancing and practice my whistles, horns, and wheezy screams. One year, as I walked near a male albatross named Kumukahi, he bowed deeply, inviting me to dance. He whinnied and shook his head, then watched as I faced him and rattled my beak. We bobbed up and down, stood up high on the tips of our toes, dipped our heads, and sparred with our beaks. We bobbed and circled slowly around while facing each other. He preened the feathers above his wing and rattled his bill, making a muffled sound in his feathers. I tucked my beak under my wing and honked, and then at the same moment, we stood on tiptoe, stretching our heads as high as we could, and pointed to the sky. With his beak a little higher than mine, we called together, "Oh!" After so many years, Kumukahi and I still dance whenever we first see each other. We have made our dance perfect, made it our own. After searching alone for food over the great ocean all summer, when winter comes, we arrive back here within hours of each other, and then we dance. I stand, moving our egg gently with my beak. I say, all is well. I settle back down, wriggling my body to nestle the egg beneath my warm belly. A breeze ruffles my feathers. It is cooling and welcome. I turn to face the breeze and it smooths my ruffled feathers. I reach for a beakful of damp sand and press it along the side rim of the nest. I pull a few strands from a nearby clump of bunch grass and tuck them into my nest. Beneath the bunch grass, under the sandy soil, A petrel rests in her nesting burrow. A young albatross named Ahonui walks up and stops in front of me. He reaches toward me and I tilt my head. He gently preens the feathers on my face around my eyes and beak, those itchy spots where I can't reach. Ahonui sits next to me and we visit together for a while, preening in a friendly way. Then he stands and wanders off, our visit over. I've been sitting for many days. It's hot, dusty, and dry, but now rain begins to fall. Droplets beat up on the dark feathered backs of my friends. Many of us tilt our heads back, clopping our bills as we taste the fresh water falling from the sky. I stand and preen my back feathers. Then I circle around slightly, shift my egg, and settle back down, rocking my body until the egg is secure and warm. The rain gets heavier. Rough gusts of wind ruffle my feathers, and the sky turns dark with storm clouds. I hear the boom, boom, boom of waves crashing on the beach. Above the grasses and leafy plants around me, I can see the tops of those distant big waves and some albatrosses flying away. I sit tightly, spreading myself over the nest, protecting my egg from the driving rain and wind. The storm passes quickly. The ocean is calm again. The dark clouds are gone. It is midday and there's a blue sky and bright sun above. Tired, I tilt my head back, tuck my head into my shoulder feathers, and close my eyes. I'm dozing when I feel the air go swoosh right next to me. I open my eyes and I see my mate, Kumukahi. He leans toward me and we touch bills. He preens the feathers on my head. I tilt my head so he can scratch the itchy places. He sits next to me, very close. He tries to push me off the nest, but I don't want to leave. I want to stay and keep our egg warm. I stand to shift our egg a bit and then sit again. Kumukahi preens my feathers some more. He's gentle, but he keeps leaning into me, trying to inch his way onto our nest. I stand, and this time he nudges me aside. I let him nudge me aside. I watch as Kumukahi talks quietly to our egg. Then he snuggles himself down onto the egg. He preens his back and wings, smoothing the feathers that got ruffled during his long flight over the windy sea. I am stiff because I've not walked for a long time. I stretch out my wings and give a good shake. I hobble to a nearby clump of grass and pull off a few strands. I toss them with a flick of my head to where Kumukahi can reach. He picks them up and tucks them in alongside his body. He clops his beak 2 times. I lift my head and say, moo. Then, as I go to get more grass, I suddenly feel very thirsty. I look toward the sea and it calls to me. The feeling is so strong to go, I don't even look back. I face into the wind, and suddenly I am in forward motion, running, wings outstretched, tap, tap, tapping my feet on the flattened sand. Faster and faster I run, the wind, the lift, and then I'm in the air. Gliding and flapping a bit, but now I'm over the ocean and the wind lifts me. I soar. With reaching outstretched wings, I turn my body to one side and roll over to the other side, rising up on the wind over the rolling swells. Then down I sweep into a water valley, the tips of my wing feathers skimming the surface. I catch the updrafts and back up into the sky I fly. I see a group of birds floating, bobbing and bathing, and I glide down to join them. With my webbed feet out in front of me, I touch down while pushing the water away, making a smooth, sloshy landing. I take a long drink of refreshing water, then preen myself and clean myself. Shivering and shaking my wings in the water, I wash away the dust and mites. Rocking back and forth, I use my wings to pull water to my underside, cleaning my belly feathers. Then I take another drink of water. I run across the surface of the sea, flapping my wings, and take to the air again. The wind is strong. It whistles as my wings cut through the air. I must travel far for a good meal and get there quickly so I can fill my belly and return to our nest. I stretch out my wings and glide at full speed toward the cold waters in the north. I soar in big arcs over the churning sea, over the swells and splashing waves. Adjusting my wing feathers to catch the air currents, I change the angle of my wings and shoot up high into the sky, then zip down toward the sea. I turn from side to side, up and down, over and over again. Hour after hour, I sail over the water, through the wind. The air is getting cooler, and I feel the chilly ocean spray. The sun is at the horizon and on its way down for the night. I'm near a place where warm waters traveling one way meet colder waters traveling the other way. At this place where the waters meet, I will look for food. The pattern on the ocean surface shows me where this is. Squid, my favorite, live deep in the ocean, but at night they rise to the surface. I can smell them. They are near. I land on the water and see some flickerings of light beneath me. I paddle my feet, moving in a small circle, stirring up the tiny light-making creatures of the ocean. Attracted to the light, squid swim to me. With my sharp beak, I grab and swallow one slippery squid, then another. I eat a strand of flying fish eggs that's attached to a small piece of wood floating by. I eat and eat, for it's been a long time since I had a good meal. A crescent moon is rising and stars are twinkling in the dark sky. I bob and drift, moving my feet slowly through the cool water. Although I was born on land and Kumukahi waits for me there, my true home is over the sea. I spend most of my life here. Kumukahi will not leave our egg while I'm away. I will soon return, so he can fly to fill his belly again. I run and take to the air, heading farther north to more of my favorite places to find squid. I feel the wind in my wings and look down at the rolling sea, knowing there is good food to eat in many places below the surface. I fly, I soar over the seas, against the wind, inside the storms, with long, strong wings locked in place. I could fly forever, dreaming forever, over the endless, beautiful sea. Today has been the perfect day. So there's all kinds of great information after the story, and you'll have to have a look at the book to see it. But now I wanted to share with you what my block looks like. So all of the art in the book was made with a block like this. It's 100% recycled rubber, and I use this tool to carve it out. So all of the blocks are first printed in black ink, and then I hand color with colored pencils. So that's my technique. When you see the art, then you'll know how it was made. So all of the descriptions in this book are actually based on my observations when I was on Midway, and I spent a lot of time with albatrosses there. So Andy, are you going to join me?
Yes. Wow.
Hey.
Does anybody else feel like they're an albatross now? Caren, you put me in a time machine and transported me back to Midway, and I really felt everything that wonderful bird was feeling. It's so incredible, and so thank you so much. That was a really wonderful reading.
Good.
So
Glad
I know,
yeah,
very much. I hope that really everybody else did too. So I just have a couple of questions. I know that recently you were up at Midway conducting the annual albatross count and volunteering. So how long were you up there, and what were you doing up there?
Well, this past season I was there for 2 months, and I'm part of a group, and the group does a yearly albatross census. So we count all of the active nests. So a pair of albatrosses have one nest with one egg, and we count an active nest. That means there's an egg on the nest, and there's at least one albatross on that nest. So we count Midway Atoll, which is comprised usually of 3 islands. Sometimes the tiny one, Spit, disappears, but it's Eastern and Midway.
Wow, how long does that take?
Oh, it takes a long time, and it took this year because of COVID. We had a very small team, and we also had to stay away from everybody else for 2 weeks before we could actually begin working. So during that time, we did as much as we could to prepare, but it was we were able to go out and be among the wildlife at certain hours of the day. But we had a lot of help this year. We were an ace team of 7 this year. Used to be 19. Wow. and then 12 or 13. And now we only had 7, but we had a lot of help from U.S. Fish and Wildlife people who were amazing. And we really appreciated it. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So these are some of the photos that I took when I was there.
Yeah, so how has the process changed over time? I know they've been doing this for many years and things have changed a lot on Midway. They've done some incredible restoration of the native grasses on Midway and getting rid of a lot of the invasive species. Right now, they're in the process to try to get rid of the mice, which unfortunately have been predating on the albatross. But so what's been your experience? How has it changed, the count changed over the years?
Well, I've been to Midway 3 times now at this point. And the first time I was there was the hatch year 2015. And since then, it's amazing. Every year there are more and more bone-in petrels. So that's what you see on this slide is the bone-in petrels. They've made a huge comeback since the rats were eradicated on Midway. And what you see on the slide on the left is a Laysan albatross nesting above a bone-in petrel burrow, because the bone-in petrels are burrowing birds. So they, like you saw in the book, they are underground. So sometimes it's like an apartment complex with different species layered on top of each other. So now there are so many bone-in petrels and so many burrows that we wear burrow shoes when we count almost everywhere. So we're wearing shoes that are kind of like ski shoes, if you can picture that. And we wear them because it disperses our weight and we don't crash into nearly as many burrows as we used to. And there are burrows everywhere. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so you wear special shoes for that to try to avoid crushing a burrow, right?
Yeah, we slip our shoes into these. There are all different versions of them. People find what's comfortable for them. Some are handmade, and we actually use ski shoes attached. Snowshoes attached to our boots.
Wow, that's neat. So I know as you mentioned, you've been up there a few times. Was there anything that stood out to you this time or unique seabird behaviors?
Well, this time I was really fortunate to stay 2 weeks longer than I usually stay. So I got to experience hatching. And I have some pictures here showing the just the little beginning of a bird, a chick hatching from a Laysan albatross, under a Laysan albatross. And that's the same chick later on. And I also got to see a little bit more the short-tailed albatross, because on Midway there are 3 northern albatross species: the short-tailed and the black-footed albatross and the Laysan albatross. So I think there's one couple that had a successful egg hatching of the short-tailed. They're very rare at this point, and they're incredibly beautiful. They're bigger than the Laysan and the black-footed albatrosses, but that's George there. I said George. I think that's his name. I'm not 100% sure of that. I'm sure someone's gonna give us in the chat. Correct me, please. Anyway, the female was very skittish, so we were allowed to go not too close to the male, and they're remarkably beautiful birds.
Yeah, and I'll mention to folks in the chat that we will have time at the end for some additional questions, so we'll take some of those questions at the end. So what were some of your favorite parts about being on Midway?
Well, it was really fun to watch, as you see here, the feeding. The black-footed albatrosses gave their eggs hatched first. So I got to see slightly older chicks, and it was a lot of fun. Can you go to the next slide? I also love the way albatrosses are so curious about you. The really young ones. I'll just be sitting and writing something or adjusting my camera, and all of a sudden I'll feel somebody tugging on me, and there's an albatross that's curious about me. So that's one of the remarkable things about being in such an amazing place where there's more wildlife than there are people, is sometimes the wildlife is not afraid, but they're curious about you. So that's quite special. I also loved just seeing how they fly. Seabirds are incredible. They've just completely captured my imagination and my our curiosity. They just continue to completely blow me away with what they do, how far they fly. And I mean, they use less energy in flight than they do on land. So it's pretty incredible. And they're so devoted. I mean, they come back together, they mate for life, or the life of one or the other. So they have we have certain things in common with them, which makes them, I think, very, we humans appreciate them in different ways because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And tons of other wildlife.
Yeah. The white terns follow you around and make that amazing little clicking sound over your shoulder.
Just wonderful. The red-tailed tropic birds they're always, when they come around, they start to do their dance, which is an incredible dance in the sky. And they do a big, like a carousel going around and around. And the brown boobies are also amazing, diving in. Yeah, it's quite something. And it was also really cool to very quietly be hidden and to see Hawaiian monk seals keeping a distance. They're very protected because they're just, making a comeback. But we did see several. There were quite a few that would come onto the beach and rest. And this was about a 4-year-old female and a real youngster, and they were actually frolicking. And I watched them for a very long time, and that was so special. It was so cool. They're really cute.
Yeah. They are. Yeah. Well, your art is just truly incredible. What do you hope your art inspires in those that see it?
Well, I really hope that my art and my stories really engage people and interest people and get them to like wildlife enough where they really do want to get involved and learn more. So I feel like it's kind of like a gateway into conservation. So that's what I hope to do. I've done several books now that are towards conservation. The last book was a Hawaiian forest bird book, and it was about an extinct forest bird. And the story that I'm working on right now is about the uwa'u, a Hawaiian petrel. That's another seabird story. And they're all designed in the hope that people really just fall in love. And there's also a ton of information packed into these storybooks. So hopefully everybody will want to make art and write their own stories and get involved and volunteer for wildlife.
Yeah, these pieces are wonderful. They're like one of those Tibetan mandalas where you have so many different things going on, and just this amazing kind of geography in the painting itself. So thank you so much for your reading and for sharing. We're going to share a little bit now about seabirds in Papahanaumokuakea and Cordell Bank, and the ones that cross over between. And then we'll have some more time with Caren at the end for questions. So we will get to your questions. So just quickly, the area that I work for and that we manage is Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. And as you can see here, we're the most remote part of the most remote island archipelago on Earth, thousands of miles from any continental landmass. And these tiny islands provide refuge for these seabirds, one of the last places on Earth where many of these seabirds can nest and be in a predator-free environment. So we're the largest fully protected area on the planet, 1.5 million square kilometers or 582,000 square miles. If you were to overlay Papahanaumokuakea over the United States, it would cover from about roughly New Orleans to Las Vegas, as you can see in that map in the lower left-hand corner. So it's a vast area, and 14 million seabirds live up in this area and nest and breed, and also many visitors. The islands include, the area includes atolls, and the only atolls in the United States, provide very unique habitats for seals and sea turtles to rest and nest, and of course seabirds. And it also includes some incredible cultural sites, particularly in the first two islands of Nihoa and Mokumanamana. And those islands have the highest density of Native Hawaiian cultural sites anywhere in the archipelago. And still to today, we continue to facilitate and help to coordinate Native Hawaiian access to these islands. A expedition just left a few days ago, in fact, to do cultural observations of those islands, also to study opihi, the Hawaiian limpet, and to do other observations around some of the changes that have happened in Papahanaumokuakea. So if you want, you can go to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs website and follow that expedition, or on our Facebook page. But as far as seabirds, we have 21 species of seabirds that nest in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. We have red-tailed tropic birds, 3 different types of boobies, 3 different types of albatross, the Blackfoot, Shorttailed Albatross, and Laysan Albatross. And the great frigate bird down there with his beautiful, beautiful pouch that he shows off to attract a mate, and just some incredible seabirds. We also have even more than that, about 25 other species of seabirds that don't nest in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, but come to visit this place. And so here you can see kind of a list of the nesting seabirds that we have. Oh, they should have added the short-tailed albatross. So that's a recent addition. Only recently has that bird started to actually successfully hatch and rear chicks on Midway. But you can see some of the totals of the birds. It's incredible when you're up there during breeding season. The entire landmass is covered in seabirds, and the sky is just darkened by, particularly the petrels on Midway when they're taking off out to sea, as you saw in Karen's wonderful picture earlier. But at one point in time, these seabirds were on the brink of extinction, and this is what initially drove protections for the northwestern Hawaiian Islands back in the early 1900s. So for many years, they harvested guano from these islands for the nitrogen, and also harvested the eggs for the albumin to use in photographic processing. And you could see many, many millions of seabirds were killed across the Pacific during that time for these industries, and they were nearly wiped out. Particularly the short-tailed albatross was almost driven to extinction. But today is a different story. This is a picture of Midway during the height of albatross nesting season. You can see just white heads as far as the eye can see. It's an incredible sight. The first time I flew into Midway, you have to come in at night, and so you don't run the risk of an albatross going through your propeller. And I remember landing, looking out the window, and I was like, wow, it looks like snow. Is there snow on Midway? And what it was the dunes kind of on the side of the airport, and just thousands and thousands of white heads of the albatross that look like snow. So it's an incredible sight to see. And Fish and Wildlife Service does accept volunteers for the annual albatross count. You can check their Midway page for Fish and Wildlife Service and see, probably not this year because they're doing the mouse eradication, but the following year they will accept more volunteers for that. But we do know a lot about where these albatross go. These are satellite tracks of several albatross that we really had the good fortune to attach satellite transmitters to. The ones at Midway and Kure typically go to the west, up to the end of the Aleutian Island chain and Russia to forage. But the ones in the middle of the chain at French Frigate Shoals travel over to Jenny's area to forage for food. So at this point, I'm going to let this albatross fly us over to Cordell Bank, where Jenny's going to tell us a little bit about the seabirds that are found there.
Thanks, Andy. That was great. And thank you, Caren, for the book reading too. And I'm so immersed in Hawaii, but I'm going to bring you all to California now. These albatrosses that are part of the story are North Pacific albatrosses. So they're in the northern hemisphere more so than other albatrosses, which are in the southern. And the black-footed albatross in particular has a real connection between the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument and the west coast of the United States. And on the west coast of the United States, we have just an incredible rich upwelling system and 5 national marine sanctuaries from Olympic Coast all the way down to Monterey Bay. So in this area where I am, just north of San Francisco, just go back one slide. Thanks. Where I am just north of San Francisco, we have Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, and the Cordell Bank is totally offshore of that. And then Monterey Bay is just south of it. And the reason we have 3 different places, they were designated different times, but this whole area is really one of the most productive in the world in terms of food in the water. And that's because of this incredible upwelling system we have, the California current that starts really moving through upwelling season in the spring and the summer months, which generates a ton of phytoplankton and zooplankton, which becomes food for fish and squid, which those albatrosses love. And that also draws in a lot of predators from nearby, but also from far away. And at Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary, being offshore and having some unique features of the Bodega Canyon and Cordell Bank, it really draws seabirds there. We have had 78 species identified out there when we've been able to be out at sea on boats. But here's a nice graphic just to show how far animals will travel to come here to eat, because the food is guaranteed from that California current ecosystem. We have leatherback turtles that come across from Indonesia, the shearwaters that come up from New Zealand and Chile, and blue whales and humpback whales, and then of course our albatrosses that will make regular trips to Cordell Bank, especially during breeding season. Next slide. So how do we know that? Back in the 90s, technology started really increasing to learn more about these animals that spend their entire time at sea, except when they're breeding, these seabirds. And so to learn more about where do they go, scientists were able to develop these little tags that have minimal disturbance to them and put them on their backs so that we can observe them on these satellites. And so back in the early 90s, some scientists tracked albatrosses coming all the way to California from Turn Island to get food and bring it back to their chicks. That's over 2,000 miles one way. And they found one bird did it 3 times during its breeding period. So that meant that bird left its chick on the nest and flew to California to feed, came back, regurgitated to the chick, and then did it 2 more times, which is incredible because as a mom, I would not drive to New York for the New York pizza and come back to California. That just is not reasonable. So to me, that story of how they do these commutes and these long times away from sea is just amazing to think about, the air that they travel, the water that they see, and everything in between. So they're just phenomenal commuters in carrying out their lifestyle. Next slide. Andy, can you go forward on the next slide?
Yeah, just to check, is your webcam on? Just want to make sure somebody commented. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Great.
So, there's a little graphic there of the little chick. So I wanted to just share some of the other birds that have been seen at Cordell Bank that we see regularly when we go out there on our boats. These are the albatross species that we see the most commonly. Black-footed albatrosses are the most common. In fact, this time of year is a time when they're pretty frequent here because it's just towards the end of the nesting season out there on the islands, and we see them a lot coming here in that spring and summer months where they're most common. We also see laysands, but not quite as common as the blackfoots. The laysands typically go a little bit further north into Washington waters. And then we also, every once in a while, we'll see some juvenile short-tailed albatrosses. The juveniles are all black. You saw the pictures of George and all white, but the big takeaway you can see is that big pink bill. It's just like a big thing of bubble gum that you can tell it's a short-tailed albatross. So I have yet to see one of those out at sea, but they have been seen a couple times by some of our science teams. So it's just always exciting to see them because they're so big with their big wingspan. We also will see shearwaters out at Cordell. These are the 3 most common that we see. And shearwaters are part of the same family as albatrosses. Albatrosses are the big tube noses, and shearwaters are part of that family too, but they just have a little bit shorter wingspan and can shear the water really efficiently to find their food and to travel long distances. These birds, sooties, come up from New Zealand, boulders come up from New Zealand, and pink-footeds come up from Chile. And they'll do this as a long migration. They don't go back to their chicks with food, but they'll do this after their breeding season's done. They'll come up to the North Pacific to feed and eat, and then eventually will make their way back down for their breeding time down on the islands. So this picture here on the right is just really fun because there was a bit of a feeding frenzy happening on the water at the time. There were whales, humpback whales feeding, and there were fish and krill in the water. And you can see one shearwater has its head in the water looking for food, and the other ones are chasing that one that has that big mackerel in its mouth, and the gulls are squawking. And that's the fun energy of watching seabirds on the ocean. There's a lot going on all the time, and it's all about the food. Next slide. Another bird we see in that tube nose family is the northern fulmar, and I call these the little robots out there because they move very angularly. They have shorter wings than those shearwaters and have a big, big belly, and another big honking tube nose there where you can see it has its little, I forgot the name of it, the little thing on top. That's where the salt will drip out from their salt processing inside. But the other cool thing about northern fulmars, they actually breed north in the Aleutian Islands and will come down here as the weather gets not so great up there, and they'll spend a good part of their fall and winter here in California waters. The other thing is that you'll see a lot of different what we call morphs or colors of fulmars, and we'll see different shades of them from light brown or white or spotted. We have alcid birds. These are birds that dive under the water. And so these are the locals that breed locally on the Farallon Islands or on the coast. And tufted puffins and murres and auklets all eat fish, but Cassin's auklets eat krill. Next slide. And the krill are tiny little euphausids that kind of line the water like that on the surface. It turns really red. One more slide is a close-up of the krill. That's what it looks like. So we really watch the oceanography out here in the years where krill is really abundant and doing really well. The Cassin's auklets will breed fairly well locally on the islands, but when there's not a lot of krill for whatever is happening in the ocean, the Cassin's auklets tend to not breed so much because they only eat krill. They can't fit fish in those tiny little bills. Next slide. Another group I wanted to share is about our thieves and pirates. We have pirates out in the sanctuary. And these are birds that actually chase other seabirds to have them cough up their prey and steal their food. So the Jaegers and the skuas, sometimes we call them bully birds because they kind of chase those other birds and they dive down after them, and there's a whole chase going on. And it's pretty intense to watch because they're pretty intense birds. So I think there's a couple movies that portray the Jaegers and the skuas as kind of bullies, and they kind of are. Next slide. So one of the cool things about seabirds is they're local ones that you can see from the shore or on a boat right near the shore, but a lot of these birds that we're sharing today are offshore. They are far away from the coast, so they're really hard to see. But there are some special trips that are done up and down the coast between California and up in Olympic Coast near the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary that will charter boats to take people offshore. They're very specialized trips. They call them pelagic birding trips. And so there are very small numbers of people that do this, but it's pretty unique and special. And there's some people that are like life birds. They want to see their life birds, and they'll come out to go see either petrels or the albatrosses. And so these are some of the towns along the coast here that have trips that go out to the sanctuaries to go view these pelagic birds. You can also go to each of the sanctuary websites to learn more or get in touch with sanctuary staff, because sometimes it's not a pelagic trip charter, but a fishing boat charter, and we can try to help you get out to go see some of these animals. Next slide. One of the other things, though, if you do, especially on the Hawaiian Islands, there are a couple areas where there are albatrosses breeding. We really want to encourage people to please be respectful of viewing wildlife. This can be an amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So our National Marine Sanctuary Program put together some really great wildlife guidelines that you can use, and please share with others to help promote people to see these animals, to keep yourself safe and keep those animals safe. You can scan that little QR code, or we'll put the link in the chat towards the end as well during questions. But we really want to encourage everybody to view the wildlife, but be really respectful of them. They have so many other stresses to deal with. This helps them stay safe. Next slide. So one of the beauties of Caren's book is that it is a great educational tool. And if there's any teachers in our crowd or educators, we want to let you know about this educator's guide that Caren put together to go with her book. And that is available for free as a download. And I think it's put here in the handout section here on the GoToWebinar. And it's a great book for grades 1 through 3, has some really nice activities that can get you a little bit further into the natural history of the birds, and a really wonderful example for students, being that they're such an ambassador for teaching about the ocean. We also have Winged Ambassadors, which is another curriculum that actually Andy at the monument and I worked on with Oikonos Ecosystem Knowledge, a nonprofit that actually did quite a bit of research tagging albatrosses from the islands, but also tagging them here at Cordell Bank. And together we put together this wonderful group of lessons that have videos and PowerPoint slideshows and activities to get students aware about them through the eyes of ocean literacy. It gets into the issue of plastic ingestion and students learning about that, because a lot of these birds are eating plastic on the ocean, which is really not healthy for them and can result in death. So this is a great tool to get into that idea, having them fall in love with the bird, and then introducing the idea about plastic and taking action through campus debris survey and extra activities around that. And those are all available for free online as well. Next slide. And, you know, we can't talk without leaving you with the stewardship message of the things that you can do no matter where you are to help seabirds. The number one thing that we have a lot of ability to take action on is just helping reduce plastic pollution, avoiding plastic as much as possible, using reusable containers, keeping trash off the ground. Participating in cleanups with families helps people see the issue and try to take better care of keeping trash off the ground, and educating others about it. And learning about the circular economy for better waste management in general globally, so we can have a better way to deal with this amount of waste that we create in our society. So these are actual things you can do by yourself and in your communities to help seabirds, and we will hope you're already doing some of them, I'm sure. Next slide. So as part of Get Into Your Sanctuary Day and this week of Get Into Your Sanctuary activities, the National Marine Sanctuaries have these badges that you can earn in this Park Passport app. And you can earn a couple of badges if you're a badge collector. It's a fun thing for kids to do or families to do by going to the bluestarfam.org Park Passport, and you can earn these 2 badges by attending this webinar today, and learn about other places to visit as well. And right before we get into questions, I want to just share that the albatross are also an incredible story of hope and resilience, and they are so charismatic. They capture your hearts because they are so similar to us as humans. We can see them and appreciate their behaviors and communication. This bird is Wisdom, the albatross, that is what we think may be the oldest known breeding albatross still breeding today. I believe this year she was 70 and still laid an egg. And that is just an incredible story. For 70 years, she has been laying, well, not laying eggs the whole time, but still laying eggs today. But she has made it through longline fisheries, plastic ingestion, you name it, and she's still going. And so she's an incredible symbol of hope and resilience for helping the ocean and us getting involved to help the seabirds too. And so before we go on to finish up, we wanted to take time for questions. And thank you for coming back on, Caren and Andy. I'm sorry we're running a little long. And Andy, do you want to take some
we have a lot of, sure, we have a lot of great questions. So one of the first questions is, how long are the albatross out at sea getting their food?
I guess it depends on what stage they're at. I mean, when they go, when the albatrosses are nesting, that when one adult comes back, the other one goes out to sea. It can be 2 weeks. It can be up to 3 weeks sometimes. I mean, it's incredible how much time they take and how they've adapted to that kind of that lifestyle. But they go really far, and they're pretty fast. Do you know how many miles per hour they go? Either of you?
Yeah, I looked it up once. It was like 50 miles an hour. I mean, it's pretty fast. You know, it's like crazy. Caren mentioned that they use, so they did energy studies on albatross and did find that they use less energy practicing what they call dynamic soaring. So they have the ability to lock their wings. And what they do with that is they use waves to go down into the trough of the wave. And just like when wind hits an obstruction and it creates an uplift, they use that uplift to carry them up, and then they coast down and they lock their wings. They're not flopping at all. And they do this dive in and out, and it's incredible to watch. And they'll go like that for thousands of miles and burn hardly any energy. Part of their brain will go to sleep and the other part will still be awake. They have an incredible, you know, they did recently find that they have like magnetic sensors that they key off the Earth's magnetic field to tell them where they're going, and they can come back to the same, nearly within a few feet, the same spot that they were nested the previous year. They mate for life. You know, these birds are just incredible.
They sure are.
Yeah,
I know that
Karen mentioned go ahead.
I was just going to say, when the chick hatches, I know that that's when they really have to bring a lot of energy to that chick. And so that's when they start to do those long distance commutes to the West Coast and up north, because that's where there's some high energy. So they'll go for longer, but then they bring a ton more calories back to the chick. But I think when that chick first hatches and it's still an egg, they just do the local commutes to the local seamounts in the area. So those chicks really need a lot of energy. So those parents have to work hard to get it.
Yeah. And they get huge.
They get huge. Yeah, they get bigger than the parents. This is a fun question. Are you aware of any accounts of albatross collisions while sleeping on the wing?
That's funny.
I haven't heard about anything. Have either of you?
No.
You know, it may happen. I'll tell you, this is really tragic and sad, but at the same time, it illustrates one of the reasons why. So on Midway, before humans came there, it was just a sandy, flat atoll. There were no trees there or anything. And when the military took over on Midway during World War II, they wanted to turn it kind of into Honolulu. So they brought in ironwoods, they brought in all these other plants, they brought in mosquitoes and insects and mice and all this other stuff. And the trees represent a severe hazard to these birds because although they are incredibly dexterous in the air, they're super awkward on land. And landing is one of the funnest things to watch. Sometimes they crash land, they tumble over each other. It's really goofy. But one time I was on the beach, and there was nothing for any, as far as the eye can see, on either way, or the ocean behind me, maybe there's shrubs. And they had a lifeguard pole on the beach for rescuing any swimmers. And I saw an albatross literally fly along the beach and smacked right into it and broke its neck and died right there. So, I mean, they're animals that are not used to obstructions in their path. No. They have entire oceans of no obstructions. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't some collisions at sea.
Although they've been at sea with each other, and it's just
Yeah,
such a huge area, and we haven't been on the scene very long. They've been around for millions of years, but they have not adapted to things that we bring into their world. So maybe there's collisions at sea with boats or something like human introduced.
possibly.
But yeah.
Let's see, we have one. How are seagulls and albatross related? What are their similarities and differences?
Well, they're in different families. So, albatrosses are in the Procelliform family, which are the tube nose family, and gulls, I can't remember the exact name of it, different family. I think the commonality is they both can process saltwater, but gulls are much more adaptable to multiple environments and, can breed on lakes and live inland and feed at the dumps. And albatrosses, they need to breed in certain habitats that are the right temperature, that just beautiful sandy beaches. They're a little picky, but there are different morphological differences between each of these groups of birds.
Yeah, what I understood though is that although seagulls can process a little bit of salt water, they can't exist on it exclusively, and they need fresh water. And this is the reason why they can't roam. That's why we don't have them in Hawaii. They can't cross the ocean. An albatross has that special gland that allows it to extract all the salt and expel it through the two little holes in its nose. And so it can drink solely seawater and be fine, and has that processing ability, whereas a seagull can't. And it may be able to process a little bit, but not fully live on salt water alone. All right, so we're going to take one more question because we're coming up on time here, and I see a lot of questions around Midway and mice and lead abatement. So I'll just answer that. So right now, Fish and Wildlife Service is in the process of preparing for their mouse eradication. So what's happened up on Midway is that because of various reasons, we don't know the exact reason, but mice have started to predate upon albatross sitting on the nest. And when they're sitting on the nest, they don't move. I mean, they are like glued to that nest. And so they're sitting ducks, so to speak, sitting albatross. And the mice have started to predate on them. So Fish and Wildlife Service is starting a process to eliminate the mice from the island. It's very complex. It involves moving the belay sand ducks that are out to another island at Midway so that they can try to eliminate the mice. And they were going to do it last year, but COVID and other things postponed it. So that's going to start, I think, the beginning of maybe late this year, the beginning of next year. They want to do it during low times of albatross during the summer when there are low numbers of albatross. And then the other question was about lead abatement. So there was an issue with albatross chicks and adults eating some of the lead paint chips from the military buildings that were on island that were painted with lead-based paint. And they have removed most of that lead. So this droop wing problem has really reduced. I don't think they've gotten rid of all of it yet, but they spent millions of dollars treating those buildings and removing those lead chips so that albatross are safe. And with that, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. So thank you again so much, Caren, for your wonderful reading and for joining us today. And
thank you. Thanks for having me. And thanks so much, Jennifer, for your presentation, and Andy, you too. And thanks so much for promoting the message of how we can help, because that's one thing about albatross is why I'm so compelled to write books about species that we really don't get to see. They're sort of hidden from us. And that's why it's so important for us to learn about them and learn things that we unintentionally do to hurt them. So there are things that we can do to help them. And that's why it's so great to continue to follow, get into the sanctuary and go to the website and learn more ways that we can make a difference for seabirds and for other wildlife.
Yeah, thank you, Caren. Thank you, Jenny, for participating. It's been a really great time with you two folks. And I want to remind you that Getting Your Sanctuary Week is not over. We got some really cool events coming up, including a photo safari scavenger hunt and virtual tide pool excursions. So if you go to that website at the bottom there, or just type in sanctuaries, get into your sanctuary, you could register for some other wonderful events that are coming up. And also, please, when you close out, don't forget to take our survey. It's very important to know and to justify these kinds of programs, to let us know what else you might like to see. And we'll keep that in mind for future webinars. And the other questions that weren't answered, we will get to those and email those back out to the audience, as well as when the recorded webinar is available for viewing, and then it will be up on the website. You can watch it as often as you want to, and hopefully with your children, seeing Caren's wonderful reading. So again, thank you so much today for attending our broadcast, and we hope you have a wonderful week and stay safe out there. COVID is kind of scary right now, so be careful, be safe, and get out and fill your soul with wonderful sites that we have around the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.